there is something I think a lot of developers downplay the importance of that I've learned recently is extraordinarily important, and that is community. Community is essential to a developer. And I have my own ideas on why it's essential, but I'm curious from your perspective, what makes community essential to a developer?
And for me in particular, I probably wouldn't have finished college as well as I probably did without having a group to kind of talk with. When I didn't understand something, like, hey, I don't get it. Or in the case of, somebody else just taking time to explain it to them and be like, oh, hold on. And then we just come to the same realizations together sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, one of the things I think community does well is it keeps you motivated. And I think especially with like COVID and the fact that everybody's kind of been, the last few years they've been living in isolation, it only further stresses the value of community and how much we need it to motivate ourselves.
Well, because it's so easy to get like just thrown into a hole. You get either one of two things, right? It's either you don't know what you're doing is of any value or worth it, or what you can do is also, you might be chasing down the wrong rabbit in what you're doing. Like, you don't have that natural, lift your head. I mean, I was literally talking to someone about this earlier today about, having a person with you or community, just like, hey, how's it going? Whatever it is, sometimes makes you lift your head and then just reevaluate what you're doing. Like, is this even worth it? Like, this isn't, yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things I think it does well is it helps, and you kind of allude to this, it sparks new ideas. Like when you bounce an idea off of somebody, or even if you don't bounce an idea, but you just kind of like share with a community what you're doing, they might give you ideas that you haven't even thought about.
Yeah. For you, who is your community?
Yeah. So for like, you're a huge part of it. But me personally, I've started reaching out to business owners and executives because I entered a new role recently, and I've discovered that I was lacking in my community. Like, I had kind of developed my own way of doing things, and I didn't really have a fresh perspective. So I started reaching out to former colleagues and saying, hey, I need help. I need community. And that's really, how I started. I need help. Yeah. So I've been scheduling lunches and coffees and just trying to organically build a community, and it's helped me transition into this new role and really motivated me to try new things, because I was getting pretty like complacent in my career.
Yeah.
I was very comfortable in what I was doing. I didn't feel like I was growing, and just reaching out to some of these people who have demonstrated success in what they're doing and proficiency, and just saying, hey, I could really use some help. And most people, when you ask for help, they're not going to turn you down. Like,
yeah.
People are very receptive to being asked for help. So that's how I've sort of started building a community, and it's helped me start this new chapter in my life.
Yeah. And so like, really from what I'm hearing from you is it's not necessarily, it's a community, but it's also building a network.
Yeah.
Right. It's that you can share communication, ideas, prospects with each other.
Yeah. Well, and on last Thursday, I went to a conference. It was a conference hosted by the new company that I work for, and it was essentially how to leverage AI in your business. And I was terribly uncomfortable because I don't handle those situations well, mm-hmm. but I challenged myself to step outside of my comfort zone. And it was, me walking up to complete strangers saying, hey, here's who I am. Here's kind of my background. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And I've made a dozen or so new contacts, and some of them are not going to manifest into something, but I'm slowly building this community. And it's hard work because you kind of have it. The default of people is to not build community.
Yeah.
But it's what we need. We desperately need community.
Yeah, and I think, that's a little bit and again, I think that's more of the extrovert approach. I mean, I know you personally are an introvert.
I'm 100% an introvert.
But you're putting yourself out there and you're trying to get that leverage. And again, and that's a little bit more of like, again, building that connection. My definition of community might be a little bit different, or at least the makeup of it is.
Yeah.
Right. So like for me, I would say like my wife, because she's a non-technical person, and if I can explain to her what problem I'm having, right, to some regard, it's acting as a rubber duck, right? Just having somebody to bounce ideas off of. Am I making any coherent sense? And if she can understand me, then you know what, great. Then that means I actually understand the problem.
Yeah.
And I can articulate what it is, and then sometimes I might have the idea of whatever that is. I know I alluded toward in college. When I was first starting, I didn't really know nobody in my program. Like I went into computer science. One of my friends from high school was also in it, but we weren't in the same classes. And I just went up to someone one day and just like, hey, this is the third class I've had with you. Like, my name is Chris.
That's awesome.
How's it going?
Yeah. And
I've known him for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Ever since.
I went to, so I didn't graduate college, but I went to a lot of college, and I had the opportunity to go at a very young age. I think I was like 16 and a half when I took my first college course. And I went to Marquette, and there was another gentleman there who was probably 30. So I stood out, he stood out, and that we just gravitated towards each other, and we sort of built a little community of our own.
Yeah.
That actually is what led me to get my first job.
Yeah.
It was just, hey, we don't fit in this community right now, so we're going to make our own.
Yeah, and for us, like, my friend that I knew from high school, like, then I was like, hey, come, let's meet this guy. And we just kind of essentially made like little study circles, more or less. And when all was said and done, we were about 8 people sitting around a table. My wife, who I was not dating at the time, just, she's sitting there like, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but sure. But it, again, it's a good litmus test of like, okay, do we understand it? Can we explain it? Do we, and we just really had camaraderie in like, hey, I had this person, and hey, you know what, I'm applying for this internship. Like, hey, I just applied for there, and this is how this went, and just kind of building, just gaining. It's like living vicariously through someone. So like whatever actions that they're doing, you're also experiencing.
Well, and it motivates you to like, when you surround yourself with people who have similar interests and succeed at them, it motivates you to do the same.
Yeah.
Community is important. I think we undervalue it. I think this next generation coming up into the workforce probably undervalues it.
Well, it's hard for them to see, right?
Yeah.
Because especially, for high school, like there's so many group projects that you do, and like it kind of puts you out of your comfort zone, and not having that same kind of experience of how that relationship is, it's kind of difficult to correlate that later.
Yeah, I like, there's a rule I like to live by, and you can take this for what you want, but I generally try to do one difficult thing a day. Just do one thing a day that pushes you beyond your comfort zone. In the case of this, it's reaching out to people and trying to build that community. But if you live a life where you consistently go beyond what you think you can do, the sum of that is going to be a life of accomplishment and meaning and purpose. But if you say to yourself, well, I don't know how to build a community, it's too hard, there's too many barriers to it, you're already kind of like defeating yourself before you even take that first step. So for those people who are like, yeah, I hear you, this community is a great idea, how do I do it? How would you suggest, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but how would you suggest to someone right now wanting to get in a community that maybe feels isolated.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're for sure in a schooling setting, I think it's easier because you're in a class with them or whatever it is. And just by being in that class with them, you already have a shared interest. There's something to talk about. Hey, how did you think today's lecture went?
Yeah.
Like, or whatever it is. Or like, hey, you know what? I'm really struggling with this homework, or hey, this homework, whatever it may be. Right. Even if like in a dev code camp, I mean, literally all of you there for the same reason. You know, it's to learn how to code and do that kind of develop in that way. Now the challenges is when you're not in that environment, right? So you might be, yourself teaching yourself, or your friends all went to business school and like, yeah, but I'm going to be the nerdy guy or the nerdy person doing whatever I'm doing. If you know your tech area, so in the case, like I'm primarily a .NET developer, I could just go to Google and I could look at .NET meetups, and there's just once a month there's a topic that somebody's presenting somewhere in my area. Just show up. Luckily for us, they serve pizza sometimes, and just learn something new. Yeah. And again, these are people that are off hours. They might not have a job, and they're just, again, same thing. You have a common interest. You were there for the same thing, something to break that ice and start talking about like, hey, what is your experience? This is who I am and all that. Yeah.
And like meetups are great. I think a lot of people are going to be intimidated by the idea of physically going somewhere.
That's where you're like me, and I sit in the back row, and usually it's a little empty.
Yeah. Even me at this it wasn't like a meetup, but there was like a 2-hour block where it was literally designed for networking and community building. I had a buddy of mine who he was like my wingman. He like brought people to me saying, hey, talk to this person, like that. If you have an extroverted friend, you might want to lean on them a little bit.
Bring them along.
Yeah. And then community doesn't have to be physical. Like
no,
it can be digital, and there are a lot of really great places to find that community. I'm gonna put an asterisk next to this, but I think Reddit is a good place to start to find a community. But I will say the Reddit community as a whole is pretty toxic. They're unforgiving in their criticism of you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good place to start, and there might be a subreddit or an AMA you can post on that would at least help kickstart this. Hey, I want to find this community on the internet. The other thing too is Discord. Like there's like people give out their Discord server
like nothing,
like their candy. So Discord's a great place to build communities. It's not like the old days where like Ventrilo or
ICQ.
Yeah, where it was just like we're here to talk. And you whereas Discord it is truly a community.
Yeah, and just say on here, because you're saying like building a community, like you don't have to build one. Like you can just find one and just join it.
Yeah.
Like,
and when it comes to building a community, I would almost discourage you against that in the online space, because it's really hard to create those organically. It's it's a lot easier to find and establish one, and maybe spawn off of that.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just thinking. So my wife, she was actually part of an online book club. It was the one that Felicia Day was doing. I forget what the name of it was now. And they did their weekly or their monthly meetup, but again, it's all online. So people started spawning off segments in their city. So like my wife found a couple. People like, hey, we're interested in actually meeting up and talking about these books.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's other ways to potentially, it doesn't have to be a small group local to you. It could be a much larger thing.
We should talk a little bit about our endeavor. I told you we weren't going to talk about this, but I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about our personal endeavor on creating a community. So
I mean, it was a good time.
It worked, and had I not gone through a divorce, we probably would have kept at it.
Yeah.
But so we decided, man, this was like,
well, we wanted to start doing game development is really what it was. And again, we have each other. We don't know anything about anything. So it's just like, okay, where could we start and just like, hey, community, help us with stuff.
No, I don't think you're remembering it right. We wanted to get into game development, and we realized there was no like
Safe
community for game development.
Well, no, but well, that's what I'm saying. The first thing we started was we started looking through Reddit, and just like, holy crap, this is toxic.
Reddit.
Like, everybody was like,
Reddit sucks.
Yeah, I mean, and like, you know, because you think like,
I'm gonna post this on Reddit, by the way.
I know you are. The first thought was, hey, what can we join to get ideas and concepts, whatever it is? Boom. First thought is Reddit. Holy crap, everybody's toxic. Everyone's crapping on everyone's ideas, even though they're valid or they're just a question.
Yeah.
So then we're just like, hey, you know what? This isn't the safe place.
But we knew of a safe place. I forgot who introduced me to it. Dev.2.
Ryan.
Was it? Yeah, Ryan. A coworker of ours from a long time ago. Hey, Ryan, if you're actually watching this. Dev.2. And it was a community very similar to Reddit, but the culture was extraordinarily welcoming and supportive. They had community guidelines that actually were inclusive. It was beautiful.
Moderated consistently.
Yeah.
And what was nice about it is the creator of this platform was active.
Yeah.
Like, they believed in it. Like, they are, and they're still active.
Yeah, they are. So we sort of talk and we're like, man, I really wish this existed for game development. Because Dev.2, it's a community for developers, but the niche of indie game development wasn't that strong there. Mm-hmm. So me being a lazy developer, I'm like, what if we made Dev.2, but we branded it for game development? Turns out Dev.2 open source.
Well,
it was open source, wasn't it? It had a GitHub.
it had an open platform. Like,
No, it was open source.
okay,
What wasn't it?
I don't remember anymore.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, yeah, it had to have been open source enough for us to fork it, and then there was, and then they had installation.
We built it. We deployed it. 100% open source.
Yeah.
Yeah. They let people use it. So we take Dev.2's open source platform, which they later rebranded
Forum.
Forum.dev. Yeah, and we start using it, and we create this community called Let's Build.
GG.
Let's Build.gg. Yeah, Let's Build.gg. It was a community specifically designed for indie game developers, and we wanted to give people who maybe didn't have a community of their own, weren't sure where to start, a place to ask those questions, share their ideas. Hey, here's because Twitter is kind of a place where you could do that.
You mean X?
X, formerly Twitter at the time. Yeah. And most indie game developers had a Twitter, and they would post
Screenshot Saturday.
Yeah. But their audience was the players, whereas Dev.2 or Let's Build, excuse me, the audience wasn't the players of the game. It was other developers. So you kind of had these two separate communities as a game developer. I'll use Twitter or X for the people that are going to play the game. And then there's this new idea called Let's Build, where I want to talk to other game developers. Mm-hmm. And I can share ideas that maybe aren't as fleshed out, ask questions that I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing with my community. But we had nobody on the platform.
Well, we had each other.
We had each other, yeah. So our strategy, I don't know if you remember this, but our strategy was we're going to find YouTube channels of content creators who didn't have a ton of views, but they were publishing consistently.
Yep.
Maybe they had like 6 months or a year of publishing weekly, and they maybe only had a few hundred or a few thousand subscribers. And we started reaching out to them. We reposted their videos on our platform, and we started promoting their how-to guides.
Yeah. And what was funny is eventually, the YouTube algorithm on Google had the Let's Build at the top of the
Number
list.
one instead of YouTube.
Yeah, instead of YouTube, which was cool.
Yeah. Then we started writing, because Chris and I, we were learning game development, so we started documenting our journey, and it was. Today I'm going to make a little character that can move, and then next week I'm going to add jumping, and we sort of build these narratives on the platform. We share our progress, and we start getting some traction. I remember one guy who is still posting. Actually, I saw him recently. He was building a game engine, and he just started posting his tutorials on our platform and sharing his ideas. But that was us going out and building a community and being very strategic in how we wanted to build it. We wanted to help content creators who had a passion for what they were doing, but maybe wanted to reach a broader audience, and we started promoting their content.
Yeah. And at this point, really that is, I don't know, building a business kind of, right? Because it's very focused, curated in like who the audience is and moderating and all that other fun stuff. So, I mean, this all comes back to the point of like, the and we were active daily. Regular, like, if not
we
more.
were trying to create a community. Yeah. And that is so much more difficult than just finding one.
Right.
But it is a cool example of how you can see a need, and I don't want to say through sheer willpower, but like
if you have the determination, yeah,
you can do
kind
it,
of,
yeah.
yeah.
And we got a huge jump start from Dev.to making their platform open source.
Yeah.
But I'm really sad we didn't continue that. And the long story is I went through a terrible divorce. I was writing a lot of the content, and I just couldn't do it. I was like, I need to step away. And we weren't able to support the creators and the community well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, because, really you and I were writing a lot of the...
Yeah.
You were doing a lot more of the deep dive. I was doing a lot more like shallow prompting, like, hey, like what's this?
Yeah. But we wrote this letter to everybody saying, hey, we're really sorry, but we love this community. We're really proud of what we built, but we cannot support it right now. It was a sad day. And not that I'm saying we resurrected, but like there were a lot of really cool things we learned from building that community.